What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another GTD episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we are going to be breaking down a Thanksgiving special. We're going to be going through the three-gamer on Thanksgiving Day, which that is going to be starting off with the Packers-Lions, then kicking it over to the Chiefs and the Cowboys, and then last but not least, the Bengals with the potential returning Joe Burrow facing the Baltimore Ravens. And we saw last year in primetime how good those two teams were in back-to-back games. It was shootouts both times. So a whole lot of fun with those things. I wanted to break down the showdowns as well, but not all of them are out as of this recording. So we're just going to have to send you what we come up with in those specific contests on the morning of Thanksgiving. But if you could, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you are new to the channel. If you're viewing for the first time, we break down weekly DFS slates every single week. So normally there's a showdown. The main usually comes out on Fridays. So be sure to put on your notifications and turn that on so you can be ready for that first look. And then on Sunday mornings, we're going to be building our lines, sending all that fun stuff in the Discord. So please get in there. We're doing a lot of college content. Emery just brought down his biggest risers and updating the prospects for the 20 this on the defensive side of things. So that video was released on Monday. So please go check that out as well if you're into all that kind of stuff. So we are getting to the end of November. A whole lot of fun stuff to look forward to. We are getting cold weather. We need a big bounce back week after a rough Maine this past week, but I am excited. This is a fun slate. This is the perfect one to do it. So I would say let's just get right into it. So once again, like I said, the reason why this slate is so fun, it is because 3 of the 4 highest totals on the entire week for the week 13 NFL slate are on Thursday. So a lot of fireworks in all these games are expected, and I'm excited to break it all down. We're going to go to the quarterback situation first, and it is a loaded slate. If Jordan Love is the lowest price quarterback and you've got 6 awesome options. At this point, I know Joe Burrow is on IR as of this designation, but the expectation, full go last week, full go on Monday. It sounds like he's going to be returning, and also Jamar Chase, who was suspended this past week, will be returning as well. In basically a win or you're done kind of game. They might be already done anyway. They might have to run the table, and it's still not enough, similar to last year. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean they can't be competitive and compete. Going against Baltimore, though, it is worth noting that this is going to be an outdoors game late in the season. So with that said, the weather, at least this is the only one of the slate that is going to be outdoors. Not expecting any participation, no extremely strong winds, just it's going to be cold. So maybe slight bump. I don't really think it really impacts it that much. It's just worth noting 2 are in the dome, 1's outside. Make of that what you will. But Joe Burrow, like I said, returning, it'll be a fun one. Going against Lamar, who does have a Q tag, he's going to play. The problem is he hasn't really been himself since he's returned. He did have a 4 touchdown effort. He had to be involved on all 4 touchdowns against Miami to salvage and get there with 25 fantasy points. But since then, 16, 6.7, 7.2 last week against a very gettable Jets defense also. No touchdowns in the last 2 games, 1 touchdown the one before that. And Bengals are one of the worst defenses in football. So it's a great opportunity to get back on track if you are Lamar Jackson. But being the highest priced quarterback, it's really, really tough with how he's been playing of late, not really running a ton or nearly as effectively as he was prior to his hamstring injury. It's hard to get behind that, especially when there's not really confident options to stack with. All it is purely this defense sucks so bad, somebody's going to go off, and that's just kind of how you have to approach it. If you're talking about the ownership, he's going to be the second highest owned quarterback. He's going to be the highest priced quarterback, hardest to trust, and right now, as of what we're seeing, it's showing us the biggest negative leverage quarterback. So as good as the matchup is, it's one that I'm willing to stay away from. On the other side of things, Joe Burrow, it is interesting. T. Higgins is going to be out because he was concussed in this past game on a deep ball. Basically, it was T. Higgins and company. Now it's going to be Jamar Chase and company. So Joe Burrow coming back, I would anticipate Jamar having just as similar of a dominant target share that he has throughout the entirety of the season. And then who else can step up is really going to be the big question. I know Chase Brown has been really playing better of late. We'll get into the running backs in a little bit, but that is the options on that side of the game. The first one, I think, is the most polarizing game just because I think it might be some of the least owned of all the players because of the pricing purely. And it's more so on the Detroit side of things. Jared Goff, again, every single time you're playing him, it comes down to, can you go over 300 yards and or can you be involved on 3 touchdowns? 18.2 fantasy points. probably not enough for this loaded QB slate. On top of that, Green Bay has been pretty solid against quarterbacks throughout the entire year. Definitely against Philly, what he did, his poor bet, probably worst game of the season. I don't think can get it done. It's got to be similar to what it was with the Washington game, where they score 30 plus points. He's involved on nearly, or if not all of those scores, and he has gotten there before. But $5,800, at least his price dipped a little bit because of the slate. The thing is, the rest of his guys are just so highly priced. It's hard to instill a ton of confidence in it. The biggest interesting spot is going to be Patrick Mahomes. 3 games, similar to what Lamar has been doing. 2 games in the last 3, he has not been involved on a touchdown. And then one time he has. This past week, he actually had the 350 yards, which got him to 21 fantasy points plus a 2-1 conversion for what it's worth. Now this is a very gettable spot, but you feel a little better about the stacking options when it comes to Patrick Mahomes compared to Lamar Jackson. I know Lamar, by default, if you're going to do it, it's probably Zay Flowers. It's going to be a tight end because of how bad Cincinnati's been defending the position. Like last week, Hunter Henry was a chalky tight end, went over 100 yards, a touchdown, and then almost had a second one. He got called back due to a penalty. So Mahomes, at least you know that Travis Kelce is going to be involved as a top 3 or 4 option. It's going to be Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy has been the guy that has not gone off yet since Rashee Rice has been back, but his price is by far a season low. So it's a buy low spot and a good opportunity against a very gettable secondary. So that's a very interesting option. He's going to be the highest owned quarterback, but he is still showing positive leverage. That's how interesting and intriguing Kansas City is, at least. And then on the other side, Dak Prescott, man, kudos to how great he's been playing. He did have a 2-game lull right before the bye against Arizona and Denver, respectively. But since he came out of the bye, he had a 4-touchdown effort and then over 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. He's been lights out throughout the entire season. And when he's in the competitive game environments, he has the possibility of just really getting there. And on top of that, similar to what I felt good about saying with Patrick Mahomes, you kind of know what you're looking for. It's George Pickens, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Jake Ferguson, and then you can throw in, I guess, Javonte Williams because he's got the lion's share of the running back touches. But even like Ryan Flournoy, who's like the wide receiver 3 in terms of reps, Kevontae Turpin, they're not nearly holding a main slate value enough to where they're even a consideration. So if you're going with Dak at a modestly priced 6-3, it's really easy to know who you're going with. The thing is with this slate, when you're double stacking, it is going to force your way in a lot of respects, and you're going to be fading a lot of very fun names up top. So it's just worth mentioning. The most polarizing but interesting one, because he is this cheap, is Jordan Love. He looks like he's showing as one of the lower owned, yet he's only 55, and he probably has a top 3 matchup on this slate. The problem is 3 of the last 4 games, he has not had a touchdown. But then the other game, 17 still probably isn't going to get it done, even though it is cheap and reasonable. He needs to have the 3 touchdown effort, which he has done before. I remember his rookie slate or his rookie year going on the road. I remember his first year as a starter going on the road against Detroit on Thanksgiving, and him and the Packers popping off to go up 2+ scores early on, and they were ahead the entire game. And I think they ended up pulling it off, and he did very well based on his price point. Now, $5,500, lowest starter on the slate. The problem is with all the injuries they have banged up, with Tucker Kraft being out since he went out a couple weeks back, they really haven't had a ton of ability to move the ball. And that's really shown. The last 3 games under 200 yards. Like I said, the last 4, he's not scored and been involved on a touchdown. Josh Jacobs possibly being a miss again. That'll throw another wrench in it. And so the matchup is there. Probably the best values of receivers, because the highest priced receiver for the Packers is below $5K. That's the only way you can get behind it, because you're basically building with the studs elsewhere and you're double stacking for cheap. That's kind of the way to go contrarian, I guess, in some respects. But either way, there's options on this Green Bay Packer because of the cheap prices that we have to figure out in a little bit to see what's going on and how we can really approach this. Going to the running back position, well, there's a reason that he's the highest priced skill player. Jahmyr Gibbs, very big chalk, and it did not matter. He was like 40% owned and went for 58 fantasy points. That is the most on the season. Had 11 receptions, 219 rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns. That is his second game in his last 3 going over 40 fantasy points. If you want to go all the way back to week 7, 3 of his last 5 going for nearly 40 every single time. It's just been incredible to watch him play. He's been getting the lion's share of the reps, and that's the reason why his price is so high, is because he is a home run threat. He's the best home run threat on this slate. The problem is that he's 8'8", and there are so many fun options up top in terms of dominant skill players that it makes it really tough to click on that name and start off with an 8,800 Jahmyr Gibbs and then go to these other guys and really trust that you're going to build a comfortable line. If you want to go all the way back to week 1, I know it was a low sample size. He had 10 receptions, but that is the only reason he was any kind of viable. He had 9 carries for 19 yards in the game they played from behind. I expect Detroit to be more competitive, fight, and to not be swept against the Packers. But even if he goes for 15, that's not going to get it done. If he goes below 20, I don't think it'll get it done. I think you need that 30-point threshold, which, of course, he is capable in any given stretch. But going 88, that's a really tough price point. So that's just a decision we're going to have to make. Derrick Henry, back-to-back games, over 20 fantasy points, got there with 2 touchdowns this past game, the week before, over 100 yards and a score. And it's going against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are dead last against running backs. New England's a running back by committee, frustrating thing, and they didn't really take advantage of it. Nobody was involved on a touchdown. So that was more so of an outlier based on what they've been providing against running backs, against tight ends this year. So it is a very easy stretch to imagine that people are going to be very, very interested in Derrick Henry. Right now, he is showing as the highest owned projected skill player. And so if that's the case, 73, that's not a crazy price to spend on. And so he is going to be definitely a heavy consideration on this slate, especially when he is the closing game and you want a little bit of exposure to that final game to get you a little bit elevated cash. Going to Josh Jacobs, again, it seemed like there was a legit chance he was going to play this past Sunday. He did not. He tested it out before game. Going into on the road on a short week, I wonder if they hold him out again just in case. That said, Detroit is the toughest matchup against running backs this entire season. But if it is Emmanuel Wilson, just know that he got all the touches. So he had 30 opportunities this past week in relief of Josh Jacobs. Made the most of it. Even though it was less than 4 yards a carry, he still went over 100 yards, still had 2 touchdowns, and had 29 fantasy points as a chalky, cheap running back in an okay matchup. Now going against Detroit, much tougher. And I would anticipate if and when Josh Jacobs did miss, because this is the first game, and we will have that information before the slate locks. If Josh Jacobs is rolled out, I would anticipate Emmanuel Wilson being one of the highest owned running backs. If that's the case, because of the tough matchup, I would probably say that that's bad chalk. I could eat my words. Last week, I went with Bijan instead of Jahmyr Gibbs because I was like, these are the same 2 players. Bijan has just as good of a matchup, and Jahmyr is just not going to go for 250 yards. Yes, he did. He also went for 3 touchdowns. And Bijan barely touched the ball in the second half because the Saints just had the ball the entire third quarter. And it was my worst call of the year because Bijan didn't go over 100, didn't score, and Jahmyr just slate breaker 5,800 or 58 fantasy points was the best score in the year. And so it was a very, very tough look in the mirror making that decision. But it is what it is. You're not going to be right on every single week. Chase Brown, I mentioned earlier, really kind of coming into his own. 5 straight games, at least 15 fantasy points, has gone over 100 yards rushing, which you didn't think was even possible based on how poorly he was getting hit in the backfield in this early stretch of the season. First 5 weeks, every single time was under 4 yards a carry, kept getting hit in the backfield. It just was bad, but recently, very efficient for the last 5 games, at least 5.5 yards a carry. He just hasn't been a huge touchdown threat. He had 2 touchdowns against the Jets, which was a pretty good matchup. But since then, it's just more so he's a PPR-friendly back. As you can see with these 14 targets, this 8 targets, this 4 targets, with T. Higgins out, and it is Jamar Chase, I would anticipate Joe Burrow wanting to get a lot of checkdowns out there. And if that is the case, Chase Brown, 6,500, very, very reasonable price point. I don't mind getting to him whatsoever. He's very, very intriguing. And similar to what I said about Emmanuel Wilson, Javonte, you know he's getting the 20 touches. The problem is it's just a really tough matchup. Kansas City, especially recently, has lived up to the billing as being one of the toughest defenses against running backs. And last week, 20 carries, over 100 yards total, all-purpose. Just didn't score, but 12 fantasy points is not going to get it done at this price point. So he probably needs to get involved on multiple touchdowns for him to pay off his price tag. I know it is easy to kind of fit in, but I think between all these guys, I think I'd rather kind of spend a couple extra $100 to get to a Chase Brown, to a Derrick Henry, or go all the way down to one of these value running backs and see what happens or works out. Isaiah Pacheco, worth noting, he will be playing. It's already been confirmed right before this recording. It's not like he had even a 1A in terms of opportunity, snap share, being a goal line back. That's been Kareem Hunt for the most part of the year, at least scoring opportunities and all that stuff. But because he is lower priced than Kareem Hunt, I think he is interesting. I know it says 25th against running backs, and it seems like it's good. But Dallas, since they had the 2-game sample of Quinnen Williams being with the Cowboys, they've been lights out against running backs. So they averaged less than 2 yards an attempt, or they forced Ashton Jeanty to be under 2 yards an attempt. And then this past week, absolutely shut down Saquon Barkley. So, and Quinnen Williams has been the number 1 graded defensive lineman since he has been a Cowboy. He was already that against the run with the bad Jets this year. And that just shows how big of a difference that has been. On top of that, multiple linebackers have returned to the fold healthy. On top of that, Logan Wilson also was traded to the Cowboys. So they were 31st against running backs just 2 weeks ago. Now they're already 25th. So they've already gained 6 spots. They're not necessarily just getting gashed left and right anymore. And so I would think that is false hope and expectation. If people are just going to be, the novice guys that are going to be raking the chalk and stuff like that, are going to be paying these or going to just look at this 25th price tag, or if they're just going to look at this 25th rank, look how cheap these running backs are against a team, one of the highest implied totals on the entire slate, I think they'll probably be over-owned. Isaiah Pacheco showing is 26% owned right now. And coming into a spot where he doesn't get a ton of goal line looks, it's not like he's been flirting with 15 to 20 touches at all this year. I'm just not interested. But at the same time, I can understand if all these running backs don't work out, because other than Derrick Henry, it's not like anybody has an elite matchup. So if somebody walks into a touchdown like Kareem Hunt, once again, because he always just scores these touchdowns, inefficient, but 4 straight games scoring touchdowns, getting over 10 fantasy points for 5,300 on a slate. If a lot of these running backs boast, that could definitely work out. I just don't know if I want to take that chance. David Montgomery, $4,800 is pretty cheap. I will say that. Not a good matchup, but it is just worth mentioning how cheap he is. All it takes is him to just punch one in, and he pays off his price tag, $4,800. He is actually the same price point as Jameson Williams. So if it came down to one of these guys being a last guy in, I think I prefer the pass catching upside, the floor, or I know David Montgomery might have a better floor, but Jameson Williams for sure at this point has much, much higher ceiling. But if you're just going to try to fit in one really expensive running back, one cheap running back, I don't mind David Montgomery. I think he could be pretty solid leverage. I don't know how crazy high owned he's going to be. And he's the type of guy that you want exposure to Detroit at some point. And because everybody's expensive, if you're spending $4,000 less for David Montgomery, I don't mind taking a shot or being overweight to him. Receiver wise, like I said, Jamar Chase back. Had a huge dud against Pittsburgh in a game when, remember, he had the 23 target game on Thursday Night Football with Joe Flacco in his first, full attempt as a starter. Obviously, he came in on a short week against Green Bay when he got traded, and he was very, very efficient there, and then just got all the workload against the Steelers. Did not pan out at all in Week 11, and then was suspended because of spitting on Jalen Ramsey. Otherwise, though, especially because all of this was with T. Higgins in the fold, I'm not saying that he's going to be getting 19 targets, but he damn sure is going to get 12 to 15, and it's a decent matchup. I know Baltimore has been much, much better in the passing game since they've been getting healthy and stuff like that, but it's not like they're playing insanely great matchups. They're playing Chicago, who's been hit and miss again in the passing game. They played Miami. They played Minnesota. They played Cleveland. They played the Jets. It's not like you're playing a ton of Joe Burrows and Josh Allens and stuff like that in this recent stretch when you've had a 5-game win streak. Joe Burrow coming back for the first time does make me a little nervous, but it's not necessarily like it makes me nervous about Jamar Chase, because even though he is $8,000 the most expensive receiver, Last two games, if you remember last year against the Baltimore Ravens, Thursday Night Football, 10 for 193, 2 touchdowns, and then followed that up with 11 for 264 and 3 touchdowns. He's had so many great games against the Baltimore Ravens over the years. That is their number one rival, and I would expect him to put on a show if T. Higgins is going to be out. If you're talking ownership-wise, he's still not even that highly owned. Like right now, one of the higher-owned receivers, but still under 35 is pretty spread out up top in terms of how people want to approach this slate. So I don't mind at all getting to Jamar Chase if you can get there. I think I prefer him slightly over Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then Rashee Rice, I think you can try to fit Rashee plus whoever. It just depends on what elite skill players you want to fit. But you could probably fit 3 guys. You just got to pick which 3 are your favorite. Amon-Ra St. Brown, once again, one of the best floor receivers, and he has shown that throughout the entire year, already with 9 touchdowns on the season. Had one of his season best games, second best of the year in terms of fantasy points, with a 9 for 149 and a score game against the Detroit Lions. It helped a ton that they were down by 2 touchdowns early on for him to help get there. Going against Green Bay, not the best matchup, but he can still get there because he's one of the safest receivers in the game. But him going in between Rashee Rice and Jamar Chase, I think he might be a little squeezed to where he might be a little underowned. And if that's the case, he could be showing some pretty good leverage. Right now, shown as one of the highest leverage receivers on the slate. So the thing is, it is really tough because it's hard to go boom, boom, and then just fill out the rest of your line, especially if you don't feel good about stacking a Jared Goff or a Joe Burrow. Like, you got to figure it out somewhere. But maybe that's the way to get contrarian and different. Rashee Rice, he's been phenomenal outside of one dud against Denver. Denver is awesome as a defense, so no harm, no foul there. But went for a season best, a career high, actually, 141 receiving yards this past week. And he started off pretty low. I think he had 3 catches for 9 yards in the first half, and then just really exploded in their comeback effort and comeback win. Now going against Dallas, like I mentioned, the reason I like Patrick Mahomes so much is because it's really easy to approach this Kansas City situation. You know, if you're going Mahomes, Rashee Rice has to be in there. I don't see a scenario where Mahomes is optimal without Rashee unless there's an injury. Knock on wood, we don't even wish that. I'm not going to be investing money hoping somebody gets injured. That's just not smart. If it works out, cool, but have some conviction in your thoughts, and he's been as solid as they come. So I don't expect Mahomes to have a 30-point outing without Rashee Rice being a significant part of it. And on top of that, we see how cheap his pass catching options get from there. Never thought I'd see this coming, but George Pickens, he is more expensive than CeeDee Lamb, and it is warranted. He's been playing much better than him, and that's just point blank, plain and simple. Over the last 4 games, at least 9 targets every time, at least 75 yards every time, back-to-back games with 140-plus yards, back-to-back games with 9 receptions, back-to-back games with 2 touchdown, back-to-back games, 32 fantasy points. Very identical games since the bye. And he's coming off lightning, white-hot momentum. So going into this game, because of the fact that he is higher priced than CeeDee Lamb, people not accustomed to seeing CeeDee Lamb this low in terms of price. I mean, this year, his lowest price point has been $7,500. He's down to $69 on this slate. I know it's kind of lowered a little bit to fit some fun names in. If you are a FanDuel player, FanDuel absolutely sucks this week. We're going to build a first look, and I'm going to show you one where you can fit this with 100 remaining on that same exact line on FanDuel, negative $3,200. So that's just how much more difficult it is to fit in stars up top on that site. But on this site, it's a lot easier, and it's really easy to click on a name of a George Pickens or CeeDee Lamb nature. I know it's not a great matchup, but at the same time, being home dogs, good game environment, high total, and as long as Dallas keeps it close, I expect one of these guys to pay off their price tag. I don't know if both have a chance of being optimal, but at least one is very, very capable of doing so. And that's pretty much all I can say. Zay Flowers might be one of the highest owned because he's a wide receiver one of the higher totals at home. $6,100 is a very reasonable price. But the problem is he's the wide receiver one on the team, averages about 6 targets a game. And so he doesn't really typically have the 100-yard upside. He has 1 touchdown on the year, and I don't think he's missed a game. So it's really tough to get behind him from a just consistency perspective. I know he gets you 11 to 14 that won't get it done on this slate. He needs a big game, 20 plus. If he gets his second touchdown of the year, he's capable of doing so. I just don't think it's a great call if he is going to be the highest owned player. I'm not necessarily interested in going that route. I'd rather attack the run games, if I'm being honest, in terms of this game. But like I said, I don't get why he is one of the highest price receivers. I know it's the price point. He's kind of on an island by himself because he's the lowest, or he's the cheapest, right below CeeDee Lamb. And then after him, because T. Higgins is out, nobody as a receiver is priced below him and the next guy, which is $4,800. Going down, though, it's a bunch of, low floor, high ceiling plays. You can see Xavier Worthy pop off. If somebody's due, he might be due. It is him returning to Texas for what it's worth. But he has not been awesome since Rashee Rice has been in the fold. Only one touchdown the year himself as well, and that was way back in week 6. So if I'm going to trust doing a secondary stack of Mahomes in any way, shape, or form, it's not like I feel great about it. But at the same time, because of the price point, I think it may be worth the sprinkle. I want to see how the ownership plays out for him. And then when it comes to these other guys, these Green Bay receivers, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, a lot more interesting if you have these guys, Matthew Golden, who missed this past week due to injury. If he doesn't play, Dontavian Wicks is questionable. Jaden Reed his practice window opened. He's been limited, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to play on a short week. He hasn't played since week 2. So even if he does play, he's going to be severely limited. I think it's just an if-then. Feel a lot better about Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs as the lowest price wide receiver 1/2s on the slate. I think it's a pretty good spot, especially if a couple guys were to miss time. In terms of Cincinnati cheap receiver, I know Andre Yoshivas is the guy, but Mitch Tinsley is actually the guy who scored a touchdown. He was minimum price this past week. 6 targets, 2 for 29. He does not have a sample with Joe Burrow as a pass catcher. So it is a complete wild card in how they go about it. But it is worth noting in terms of his snap share this past week, he played 74% of the snaps, which was kind of right in the thick of what T. Higgins did. That's right where Andre Yoshivas was. So $3,500 for somebody that's going to be playing 75% of the snaps, possibly. I could dig it all the way down low. And then all these guys are kind of dart throws. Hollywood Brown has gotten 4 targets, and then he's gotten 4 targets, then he's gotten 1 target. That is the whole theme of the last 5 weeks. Going below, Rashad Bateman, kind of similar to Zay Flowers in terms of just, yes, he's by default the wide receiver 2, but that doesn't mean he's getting a ton of targets to warrant. At least he's cheap. He'll be low owned. But it's just tough to have a ton of confidence in any of these guys. If you want to be looking at any kind of value, Juju Smith-Schuster is all the way down, minimum price receiver. He played 47% of the snaps this past week. That was his best since week 6. Didn't result in anything but just 1 catch for 8 yards. But I'm just trying to spitball, trying to save you guys some money. I don't really feel great about any of these options. For what it's worth, Savion Williams also has been banged up as well for the Green Bay side of things. But down here, it's just tough in the 3K range, if I'm being honest. That's why I think I like on small slates like 3-gamers doing double tight end so much, because I do feel good about cheaper tight ends than I do on weaker receiver slates where there's just not anything really popping in the 3K range. I think I can get behind that if you're not going to go the Mitch Tinsley route and you go with we're going double tight end. Look at tight ends. I mean, Mike Gesicki returned for the first time this past week after being out a while due to injury. And he inherited a decent sample size. I know he only played 43% of the snaps, but 6 targets was one of the highest marks on the team. Him being $3,100 is a reasonable price point. Mark Andrews, very inconsistent, but he does score touchdowns. He had that fake tush push end around touchdown to win the game against Cleveland. And then the games before that had 3 touchdowns in 2 games in Lamar's first 2 games back. Doesn't get the targets he used to, but it's worth mentioning how bad Cincinnati is against tight ends. So Isaiah Likely, who also hasn't been great by any stretch in terms of a fantasy asset, I can get behind the $2,600 price tag because it opens up room for so much else. Luke Musgrave has inherited most of the snaps since he's inherited most of the snaps since Tucker Kraft went out, but it's not like he's had an elevated role by any stretch. He hasn't had more than 3 targets in any games this year. So he's just kind of similar to Isaiah Likely, a punt play that, whatever. Brock Wright, limited, but again, Sam Laporta out, so he's getting all the workload. And at least he had the elevated role because you see 1 target and then all the way to 7 and then 4 this past week. So $2,800 is fine as well. And then the big 2 up top, Jake Ferguson, Kelsey, being some of the most consistent tight ends over the last month plus at the position. But yeah, getting started, let's go ahead and start off building some lines. So I'm going to go ahead and defense. Don't have a dog in the fight. If you have a conviction on somebody you feel comfortable winning a game, that might be a little bit elevation. I just want to let you know Cincinnati's defense sucks, and they're showing as one of the higher owned defenses and still the highest leverage defense because of them being just $2,200. As long as they don't put up -4, Baltimore's offense has been struggling for what it's worth. I guess I can see it being that cheap. Dallas's defense has played much better, so I feel a little better about doing that for $200 more, especially if they are the second lowest owned defense. But it's not like they're showing positive leverage in that regard. I think because Kansas City is the favorite and they're $2,800, that's what I can get behind for the time being. And I'm going to build off that line that I was telling you guys about and how it's so tough to build on FanDuel as a comparison. So you go something like this at the start. You put in Jamar Chase, you put in CeeDee Lamb, you put in Rashee Rice. You started off like this to get some value. You put in Chase Brown, you put in Derrick Henry as your stackable options in the late game. And then receiver-wise, you're going to put in Rashee Rice, CeeDee Lamb, and then a double stack with, of course, our first look at quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. And then the last guy in can be whoever you want. I actually think it's viable to do a triple, but if you don't like Xavier Worthy, this is exactly what I ended up doing, which was going with Jameson Williams as the last guy in. So you get this. If you have a preference between Kelsey and Xavier Worthy, I'd say go for it. Usually in double tight end sets, I don't mind. That's how you're getting different and over the field and contrarian on high owned tight ends, like Travis Kelsey being the highest owned tight end. Well, he's also the highest leverage score. So putting him at the flex is the way to get a little different. And then you got the upside play with Jameson Williams. And you don't have to really do anything. The only thing you're really fading is Green Bay. And Green Bay's been probably the least exciting offense of the bunch. So I don't think that's really that big of a factor. I do think that Mark Andrews is really viable on this slate. He might be one of the better tight ends to get to, even though it's uncomfortable. So if you're going to be doing that, I think the best way to do that, going back to Xavier Worthy, maybe go down a little bit of defense. Say that it's instead, I don't want to in the double stack against and then also play their defense. So let's say Cincinnati and their positive leverage, then that's enough to afford Travis Kelsey once again, or Jameson Williams as the flex, David Montgomery, I mentioned earlier, as a floor play. Or if you wanted the wide receiver 1 for Green Bay and you wanted some exposure to that side of things on the first game, Christian Watson might make me feel a little better than Romeo Doubs, but I mean, it's not like either or not due for good games. So, mix and match, do whatever you want to if you're building multiple lines, but that's a way to go about things. I did say I want a lot of Jamar Chase, so maybe I want to go that route, fit him in and see what can happen. Let's say we put him all the way up there. You got $3,900 left, and that's enough for a Rashad Bateman, Matthew Golden if he plays. If you like Mitch Tinsley, you can go that route, go back up to defense, whether that's Packers, Cowboys, Bengals. Again, defense, I don't really have a lot of convictions about. Somebody's going to score a defensive touchdown. It's probably not going to be the one that I end up picking because that's just really how things work on these certain slates. Say you want to be a little different because Derrick Henry is the highest owned running back on this slate. Get off him. Go down cheap. Maybe this is the Isaiah Pacheco game. Maybe this is a David Montgomery game. I want to be a little different and say that it is David Montgomery. But you got Rashee Rice, you got Jamar Chase, Xavier Worthy, you got Mark Andrews in there. Might be a little tough to forward or fit somebody in. It would be cool to get to CeeDee Lamb. The only way to really do that is going down to a Gesicki, going down to a Musgrave, Brock Wright, Isaiah Likely might be my preference, strictly based on the matchup. But that's the way you go about things. I know it's a lot of high-low, but you see some upside plays, and it's really easy to go about that route. It's pretty easy to figure out how you're going to do a Mahomes build, so let's get a little different, and let's say it's a Dak build. Because obviously if you're going Dak, you're probably going to be going two two of three options. That's going to be George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. In this sample, let's go, because it's going to make us be a little different. Let's go both George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. We're going to bring it back with a Rashee Rice. That's going to fill out our receiver room, and we're going to see what else we can do to make things work. Chase Brown's just a really easy name to click on. Let's say that Josh Jacobs is out. You want some Emmanuel Wilson volume and floor. Let's go down that route. If you wanted the last two in, it's really easy to say just Mark Andrews, and then final guy in is going to be Mitch Tinsley. If you didn't like that, you want to go a little lower, go back to Isaiah Likely once again at $2,600. That just feels pretty cheap. And then last guy in can also be an Xavier Worthy as well. Now, if you want to go a little cheaper, since you have Xavier Worthy, you can go up to Amon-Ra St. Brown from Rashee Rice, or if you want to go down from defense, because obviously you don't want the Chiefs defense against a Cowboys build. Let's say you go back down to a Bengals. That's all the way up to enough to be Jake Ferguson as a triple. Or you can go to a double tight end with Travis Kelce. Again, I think the key is figuring out this $4,600 to $5K range, because somebody of these guys is going to be optimal. Jameson Williams, proof of a high ceiling. Christian Watson is a 100-yard upside. He's taken down the Thanksgiving slate before over the last couple of years. Xavier Worthy's due. Dobbs, good floor. Typically, David Montgomery could be a way to get different, but also get exposure to the Detroit side of things. To each of their own with that certain regard. Let's say you did want to go with a Jake Ferguson, right? Going down at him at tight end, and then you want to get off one of these guys. Maybe let's say George Pickens pulls in more ownership than you feel comfortable admitting. That still doesn't get you up to anybody that you really want to. That's just going to make you force you to be more balanced. If that's the case, you go to a Jameson Williams, and then you round it out with a Packer. So that's Christian Watson. I think that's fine. That's a very reasonable way to go about things. And I mentioned earlier I wanted to flirt around with some Jordan Love because of how cheap he is. If you're going to go that route, let's play pretend and let's say that some of these guys missed. Let's go boom, boom with Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, double click inside the mid 4K range. Let's put Kansas City defense back in there just because. We'll put Derrick Henry back in there as well. Chase Brown, once again, it just feels really good clicking on his name. And then you have a lot of money left the last three spots in, especially when tight end isn't that expensive. Mark Andrews opens up even more. If you're going to go that route, you can go with Rashee Rice. That's the last guy in being a George Pickens or CeeDee Lamb. Or if you have played that a ton, you want to go CeeDee Lamb on this one. That's enough for Jamar Chase as the last guy in, or Amon-Ra St. Brown if you feel a little better about that side of things. I think that's a fun way to go about a build. And obviously you see a Joe Burrow. If you are a Joe Burrow stan and you think he can just immediately come in and be a 25-point threat, you obviously see the guys that I want to build around. If I'm going the Joe Burrow route, it looks like he is going to be the lowest owned quarterback. So it's not like you're going to be very common, even though it's an obvious way that people are building with Jamar Chase and the Chases. It's just how you're going to go about the other top options because you can't really afford a ton if you are going the other routes. It's really easy to just click on Derrick Henry as a bring back. And then the last two guys in, maybe you want to go to Xavier Worthy. Maybe you want to go back down once again to a Green Bay receiver. $6,600 is probably enough to just do that. Pick a cheap defense, whatever. And then last guy in being Cowboys defense, maybe they put up a little bit more of a fight. But you get exposure to a lot of decent receivers. Got the chalky running back, but good tandem right there. And Joe Burrow's name. And then let's do one more look and build. Let's do Jared Goff. Say he is involved on the 3 touchdowns, right? Well, how's he going to do that? It's probably going to be involving St. Brown at some point in shape or form. I really like Jameson Williams being back to $4,800 after he crept into nearly the 6K range. So I would start off doing that. On the bring back side of things, it probably makes you feel the best about going with the Green Bay receiver. Once again, I think that there's a decent shot Josh Jacobs plays, but because it is the toughest matchup against running backs, it's not like I feel great about either guy as a price point. It just makes me feel like I'd rather get off that ownership. But with this one, I want to do a cheap running back though to fit some things. So let's say Isaiah Pacheco or Kareem Hunt. Maybe Kareem Hunt has a little bit more juice to score a touchdown, even though Isaiah Pacheco is a little better projected, I just hate the ownership at 26%. Kareem Hunt less than 10% owned. I'd rather go that route. Be a little different, get Kansas City exposure. I know it's a tougher matchup now, but it is what it is. Let's say we get back up to Derrick Henry once again. Tight end wise, I mean, this allows you to afford whatever you want, but you're obviously going to click on like a Mark Andrews. 100 away from the last guy in being a Jamar Chase, which would have been really fun. But you also want some Rashee Rice in there in your life as well. You can also go down a defense to get some of these guys. Like it's pretty self-explanatory how you're going about this thing. I think we have to make some convictions and some stands. I'm going to figure out how we are doing that. We're going to manipulate some ownership and see if there's any surprise inactives going into the slate. But with that said, guys, that's all I got for you. We appreciate you tuning in once again. Let us know how you're approaching the slate. Who's your favorite stack? Who is somebody that you're going to take a stand on avoiding to be different from the field and maybe try to be less duped? Sometimes it doesn't work out. You fade Jahmyr Gibbs last week for Bijan like I did. It's not going to work out in your favor. But a lot of times when you are winning, you don't want to just barely be winning. You want to be winning a lot and not be duped. We've taken down a primetime contest. We've taken down a Thursday night showdown contest where we were at 800 to 1,000 plus remainder, not duped at all. And it just makes a better payout, especially if your line is really, really crushing, because we are building a line for a ceiling, not just a cash. I'm not a cash game player. I'm a hand builder tournament player, and it's worked out pretty well for us this year. Has not last week, but it's going to get better. So we're excited to be in Discord. Happy Thanksgiving to you guys from the GTD team. But in Discord, right before lock, I'm going to be putting in my final lines, exposures, and then also going with some showdown slates because I like to play everything. So anything that I play, I'm going to be sending y'all's way, and we'll just see how it goes this week. So that said, guys, we will see you on the next one.